Morning. In the last session, we had discussed about receivables reconciliation, and the next reconciliation that we are going to go through is the reconciliation of payables. So the amount that a business owes to others, that is to be reconciled. So herein, the amount that we owe to others is because of mostly the credit purchases that we make. So they can be done from vendors or suppliers of products or services that we consume as a business. So there are multiple transactions that take place with a particular vendor or a particular supplier. And then to find out the amount of balance that is payable to a particular person or to a group of persons, we can prepare this payable reconciliation. So again, there are a couple of steps involved in preparing this payable reconciliation. First, we need to find the total credit purchases made from different vendors and suppliers. Once we know the total credit purchases, we are going to find out the payments that have already been made. And while finding out the payments that have been made, we'll find them out categorically. As in, we'll find out how many payments were made in cash, how many of them were by check, and how many were by any other modes. Along with this, we will identify whether any bills payable was accepted by us in the past. Once we found this out, we move to the next step and we try to identify if there are any checks returned or goods returned by us or any bills payable that have been dishonored during this period. Because if a check has been returned, that means the check also has been dishonored and we still owe that up money to this particular vendor or supplier. If the goods have been returned, then that means we do not owe that money because we have already returned the goods. So we do not owe anything for that. And then bills payable dishonored again means that we owe money to that person. And then at the end, we'll check whether there are any debit notes that have been raised against this particular vendor or supplier, either for short supply or for excess payment that we have made to them, or for claiming any special discount. Short supply means the goods that have been supplied are in lesser quantity as compared to the goods that have been ordered. Excess payment is when we pay more than what we owe. And then lastly, at times there are discounts that are given by vendors or suppliers. So if we are eligible for any of those discounts and we have claimed them by way of preparing a debit note, then we'll check for those and adjust that accordingly in our reconciliation statement. So let us take an illustration. So here we have an illustration of Mr. Amarnath, who has purchased goods on credit from various suppliers. However, there is a difference of opinion which has arisen with one of its suppliers. While the supplier claims that the amount receivable from Amarnath is rupees 2,53,000, on the other hand, Amarnath claims that the amount payable is rupees 2,35,000. So both the parties are saying that the amount due is different. Supplier is saying 2,53,000 and the owner of the business, the one who owes money, is saying that it is 2,35,000. So on evaluation of the records, following were identified. Certain items were identified. A purchase of 71,000 was recorded by the supplier as 78,000. Goods returned by Amarnath amounting to rupees 5,000, but the stock is in transit and has not reached the supplier or vendor. Then the third item is checks issued for 28,000 in transit. Bills raised for 28,000 purchased from supplier amounting to rupees 22,000, but goods are yet to reach the warehouse or godown of Amarnath. Prepare a suitable reconciliation statement. Now, in this case, we have both the balances given. When we were preparing the reconciliation statement for receivables, it was fairly simple as compared to this. We were just trying to ascertain the balance. In this case, the question is a bit different because we have been given the balances as per both the parties. And then we have been given the items of difference as to why both of them are saying that the amount due is different. And based on this, we are supposed to prepare this particular reconciliation statement. So again, the same format will be used because it is a statement. We have two columns, the particulars and amount, and the heading here will be amount due to supplier. And we'll call this as a payable reconciliation statement. Now, as we do in the bank reconciliation statement, we start with one of the balances. So here also, we will be starting with one of the balances. Now let us take the starting point as the amount which has been claimed by the supplier, that is rupees 2,53,000. We'll take this as a starting point and try to come to this point as the end point. Since we are starting with this, we'll write amount due to supplier This balance is as per supplier's books. So we are going to write it as it is 2,53,000. Now we'll be taking into account the items of difference and then do adjustments accordingly. The first item is that purchase of rupees 71,000 was recorded by the supplier as 78,000. The amount of purchase was lower, but the amount recorded by the supplier was higher. Since the amount was recorded more, we need to deduct it from the balance that the supplier is showing. Now the difference between these two amounts, 78,000 minus 71,000, that is rupees 7,000. That is the amount that needs to be deducted. So we come to our statement and then we deduct this less. We will call this overstatement of purchases. Next item, goods returned by Amarnath amounting to rupees 5,000. And the stock is in transit, but it has not reached the supplier or the vendor yet. Now, in this case, goods have been returned by Amarnath. So from Amarnath's perspective, goods have gone from him and they should have reached the supplier, but they have not yet reached the supplier. So since they have not reached the supplier has not made any changes in his books. He has not deducted the amount on his books. But since the goods have already been sent by Amarnath, they are going to be considered as goods returned, but in transit. So we'll be deducting this amount as well. Because goods have been returned, this amount is not due to the supplier anymore. So we go to a statement again, less goods returned, but in transit. Now these goods returned in transit are rupees 5,000. Then next item that we have is checks issued for rupees 28,000 in transit. Again, checks that we have issued to this particular supplier, they are in transit. We have sent them, but they haven't reached them yet. So since they haven't reached them, again, there is no effect that has been made. And since we have paid, their balance should be reduced. So we'll be deducting it. Again, come to a statement less checks issued button transit. And the amount of checks issued button transit is rupees 28,000. And the last item, we have bills raised for goods purchased from supplier amounting to 22,000, but goods are yet to reach the warehouse or godown of Amarnath. Now, in this case, we have a different scenario. This particular supplier has raised an invoice or a bill for goods, and the value of the goods is rupees 22,000. That means for this supplier, a sale has been made to Amarnath. But since the goods have not yet reached Amarnath, he will not be showing those in his books of accounts as balance that he owes to this particular supplier. So in this case, because the goods have been sent by the supplier, you can consider that a purchase has been made by Amarnath. So this particular amount needs to be added to the balance. Even though the goods are not in his possession, this particular transaction has taken place. So we'll be recording this by adding it. Add bills raised against goods purchased. And the amount is rupees 22,000. We have given an effect for all the items that caused the difference. Now we are going to simply deduct and add the items from the statement. So we have 2,53,000 as a starting balance. Then we have deducted three items, 7,000, 5,000 and 28,000. So a total of 40,000 is being deducted. So the balance that will come after deducting all the items is rupees 2,13,000. And in these 2,13,000 that we have got after deducting the items, we have to add 22,000, which was for the goods that are in transit. So after adding this, we get 2,35,000. Now this 2,35,000 is the amount due to supplier as per Amarnath's books. So we started with the balance as per the books of the supplier and ended with the balance as per Amarnath book. That is the same balance that is given in the question, 2,53,000 and 2,35,000. So we could have chosen either of the points. We could have started with 2,35,000 and the effect would have been the exactly opposite for all these items. And then the endpoint would have been the balance as per the supplier's books. So we can prepare a reconciliation statement in this way when there is a difference of opinion between the parties about the balance. And also we can prepare a reconciliation statement, which just follows the steps of the payable or receivable reconciliation, where you have to ascertain the balance based on the sales and the payments made or the notes raised during the course of the transactions. Okay, with this, we have completed our second study note and we are moving to the third study note, which is accounting for depreciation. So now when we are talking about depreciation, we need to understand the fact that every business will purchase some fixed assets. Fixed assets, you can also call them as non-current assets. In other words, it is capital expenditure. And the reason for buying these fixed assets or non-current assets is that they can be put to use by the business, which can help the business to earn revenue or earn income. And since the intention is to use them for more than one accounting period, we call them as fixed assets or non-current assets. But since these assets are being put to use by a business regularly, there are certain changes that take place within these assets. And these changes can be due to various reasons, mainly because of the use, but also due to other factors. So since this particular asset is going to provide you service or is going to be put to use by you for a number of years, you need to account for the fact that you own the asset. At the same time, you need to account for the fact that due to use or due to other reasons, the value of this asset is reducing. For example, if I purchase, say, a machine, and this machine is purchased in the year 2021, and I pay rupees 15 lakhs for this particular machine. Now, if I use this particular machine for 10 years, at the end of those 10 years, that is, say, in the year 2031, if I still show this machine at the same value, that is rupees 15 lakhs, will it be fair to show it at this value? Will it be okay to keep it at the same value for 10 years? Is there any possibility that after 10 years, when I try to, say, sell this asset or maybe even scrap it, that I am going to get this particular amount in return? No, there is no chance that this will happen. It is almost impossible that your asset will retain that same value for the entirety of its life. So now in this case, you know that your asset is going to lose value over time. So from the perspective of accounting, when we follow certain accounting principles, concepts, and conventions, and we are being conservative, what we do is we account for this loss by means of depreciation. Whatever loss in value occurs during the use of a particular fixed asset, that is accounted for as depreciation. In simple terms, you can say that it is a decrease in the value of an asset. Now, we have to understand that this decrease in value is gradual. It needs to happen slowly. You cannot just reduce the value in a matter of a single day. You have to take some time to reduce its value. So it should be gradual. And why this decline or this decrease should be there is because of normal wear and tear. Normal wear and tear, that is the damage that occurs by using this particular asset. Then we have another reason, that is obsolescence. Obsolescence means being outdated, becoming old, or becoming useless in a way. So depreciation is gradual diminution, that is decline, loss, or shrinkage in the utility value of an asset. How much you can put it to use, that value declines. Why it declines? Because of wear and tear in use. Then effluxion of time. Effluxion of time means passage of time. Certain assets over time, they will lose their value, whether they are used or not. So in that case, we consider depreciation based on effluxion of time. And then introduction of technology in the market. So whenever there is a better technology available as compared to the technology that you use, definitely your technology does not have any value. Take the simple example of a mobile phone. Today we use all smartphones, touchscreen phones with cameras and all other functions and facilities available to us. In this time, if you compare the technology that was first available when there were basic phones which did not even have a color screen, let alone a touch screen. So that technology has definitely become outdated for people like us who use this advanced technology. So whenever a new technology comes, the older technology is not demanded for, and it does not have any value because better things are available in the market. So now when we are accounting for depreciation, what we are going to do is we are going to charge a certain percentage of the total cost of the fixed assets that has expired. Expired meaning the benefits have already been received for that particular part, and as such turned into an expense during the process of its useful during the process of its use in a particular accounting period. So depending on how long you plan to use an asset or how long you estimate that asset to be in use, a certain percentage of the asset is going to be charged every year or during every accounting period as an expense and thus removed from its cost as depreciation. So there is an accounting standard AS6, and in that they have stated that depreciation is allocated so as to charge a fair proportion of the depreciable amount in each accounting period during the expected useful life of the asset. So remember, it is allocation. It is not valuation. We are not valuing anything. What we are doing is we are removing a certain part from the asset and making it as an expense. So for example, in this case, because I'm planning to use this asset for 10 years till 2031, what I'll do is every year I'll charge say 10%, that is rupees 1,50,000 as depreciation. So when I charge 1,50,000, this value is automatically reduced and it becomes 13,50,000. That is how depreciation is charged or depreciation is allocated. Now, moving ahead, we have certain useful accounting terms that we put to use while accounting for depreciation. So depreciation is also known by these other terms, the first one being amortization. Now, this amortization that is related to effluxion of time or passage of time. So assets which are there for a particular period, assets which have a life of their own, such assets, whenever we reduce their value, we don't say we are depreciating them, we say that we are amortizing them, or we are charging amortization. So now these particular assets, we have certain intangible assets and we have certain tangible assets. Tangible meaning the ones that have physical existence, the ones that can be seen, touched, and felt, and intangible ones meaning they do not have a physical existence, they cannot be seen, touched, or felt, but their benefits are definitely utilized by a business. So for amortization, we only consider intangible assets. Now, intangible assets are generally in the nature of goodwill. Goodwill is the monetary value of the reputation of the business. Now, goodwill is calculated for a particular time period. So it can be calculated for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, something like that. So you have already put a time period on it. That means due to passage of time, this goodwill will change. So it has to be removed. So when we remove business, we write off business, we say that we are amortizing it. Similarly, there are various other intangible assets such as copyrights, patents, trademarks, then we have registered marks, then again we have patterns also, etc. So there are various other intangible assets. You can also call them as intellectual property rights. All these assets need to be registered with certain bodies. So everywhere there are laws to protect these assets and hence they need to be registered, and a duration is allocated for each of these registrations. From the date on which it has been registered with the authority, there is a certain number of years that have been allowed during which that person can put this to use. After that, the person will have to spend certain amount of money to renew it or re-register it. So all these assets, since they have been registered for a number of years, due to passage of time, their value declines. So in all these cases, what you do is you charge amortization on them. Now, along with intangible assets, there is one more asset where we charge amortization, and that asset is called as leasehold property. So you will see this in the nature of leasehold land or in the nature of leasehold buildings. Leasehold meaning we don't own that particular place, but we have the right to use that place for a certain number of years. It is like a rental property, but it is for long term and hence it is in the category of fixed assets, but it is not our property. We just have the right to use it. And since we have the right to use it, that right is going to expire due to passage of time. So the effect needs to be shown in accounting processes, and hence on leasehold property, you'll see that amortization is charged. Then the second term is depletion. Depletion. So depletion is used in regards to natural resources, or more specifically, we call them as wasting assets. Natural resources are formed by nature. So once we use them, it takes a lot of time to generate them again. There are very few sources that are long lasting. Majority of the sources do not have unlimited life. So there are certain assets. Whenever you take output from those assets, the reserves, they decline. For example, if there is a mine and this mine is a coal mine to be specific. So if you take coal out of this mine, whenever you take coal out of this mine, whatever coal is left in this mine, that is the reserves of coal, they will decline every single time you take out the output, because there is only a limited number of coal available in the mine. So similar assets where there is limited reserve, wherever the quantity of reserve declines whenever you take any output, that is called as a wasting asset, and the reduction in the value that you do for wasting assets is called as depletion. So here you can consider mines, not just the coal mine, any kind of mine. Then you can consider oil wells, quarries, sand pits, even oil rigs from where oil is drawn for the purpose of petrochemicals, etc. So all these assets are wasting assets, and depletion is charged on such assets. Then the next term is obsolescence. Now, obsolescence means loss of usefulness. And this loss of usefulness that occurs is due to technology. Whenever technology changes, whenever there is any improvement in the method of production or the manner in which the product is produced, or if there is any change in market demand, and this change is due to any restrictions, then the loss in value that you account for can be termed as obsolescence. Now, this obsolescence, firstly, because of technological changes, there is better technology available for producing the same product that you produce with poor technology or old technology. So in that case, definitely your product will not be demanded. At the same time, due to technological advances, it becomes cheaper to produce the products. So similar products or better products may be available at lower cost as compared to your product, and hence your product will lose demand in the market. And since you lose demand in the market, you will obviously not consider manufacturing the same thing. So you have to resort to better technology. Along with that, there is the reason of restrictions. So if there are any restrictions that are applied to a particular product or a service, primarily the restrictions can be legal restrictions. If there is a ban on certain products being sold in the market, and if you are producing certain those particular products, then in that case, whatever assets you use to manufacture that product, they become obsolete for you because that product is not allowed to be manufactured. You cannot put your assets to use and they have become obsolete for that reason. So legal reasons can be there. Then you can have medical reasons. So at times there are products or services that are banned because of the medical effects that they have on the consumers. For example, in recent times, one of the favorite consumer products, that is Maggie, was banned in India because it was found to be having certain ingredients which were not medically fit for consumption by the people. So if certain things happen where there are medical reasons given that you cannot consume this product, again, there is no demand for your product. So your production assets, they become obsolete. There can be other restrictions also. So any restriction that causes your demand to change, that can lead to obsolescence. And the last term that we are going to see is dilapidation. Now, dilapidation is just the deterioration that happens due to old age. The deterioration that happens due to old age or even long use. So this can be generally seen in buildings. If you see old buildings, you will observe that their physical condition is not the same as that of a new building. You'll observe cracks or you'll observe that certain parts are falling off. That is dilapidation. So if you're charging any decline in value on such buildings that have been used for a long time, then that depreciation will be called as dilapidation. Now let us try to understand the nature of depreciation. So we've already seen that depreciation is applicable on fixed assets. It is applicable on intangible fixed assets as well as tangible fixed assets. So these assets are going to provide you service for a number of years. Now, since they are providing you service for a number of years, you need to first of all estimate its useful life. How long that asset can be used by you, that needs to be estimated. And for this duration, you will be charging the depreciation because whenever you have an asset, you do not know how long exactly you will be able to use it. So in that case, if I wait until the point where I stop using that asset to charge the entire amount of depreciation, then I will have a huge expense in 1 year. And the effect will be huge loss in that year. Because if I have an asset for 10 or 12 lakhs or 15 lakhs and I charge it as depreciation in a single year, the entire amount, then I'll have a huge expense, which may not be set off against the incomes, and eventually I'll have a loss in that year. So initially, whenever you buy an asset, you need to estimate the useful life, estimate the number of years for which you can put it to use, and based on that, you'll be charging depreciation. So this International Accounting Standard 4 that has stated that depreciation is allocation of depreciable amount. Allocation of depreciable amount of an asset over its estimated useful life. Allocation I have already covered before. Now, what is depreciable amount? So to understand depreciable amount, first we need to understand the cost of an asset. So whenever we are trying to calculate the cost of an asset, we need to take the cost plus other expenses necessary to put it to use. Whatever expenses you need to do to put an asset to use, all those expenses are to be added to the cost of the asset to find out the depreciable amount. For example, if I buy a machinery for the purpose of producing my goods. Now, this machinery is at a place where it is either manufactured or sold. It is not at my location. So I need to spend certain amount to say transport this machinery. Now this transportation can be in the form of freight, it can be called as carriage, it can be called as haulage. There are various ways to term that particular transport. So initially you need to transport that to your location. Once you have transported it to your location, there may be other expenses involved. You may have to pay wages because it may have to be carried from the vehicle that has transported it to the uh, inside of your factory or inside of your location. So you may have to pay wages for that. Along with this, it is possible that there may be certain taxes or duties that may have to be paid to get that asset to your location. If you are, say, importing an asset from some other country, you may have to pay import duty. If you're buying it from some other state, there may be other taxes that you have to pay depending on the laws of your state. Or if you're buying it from other city, you may have to pay certain local taxes to get that particular asset in your city. Now, you have got that asset to your location, but it still may not be in a working condition. So to put it to working condition, you may have to spend certain amount on its installation. It may come in parts, so you may have to spend on installation. Or installation can also be called as erection of the machinery or the asset. So all these expenses have to be added to the cost of the asset to find the depreciable amount. Now, in the accounting research bulletin, it was stated that depreciation for the year is the portion of the total charge under such a system that is allocated to the year. Meaning the depreciation that is being charged for a year should be just for that year. Although the allocation may properly take into account occurrences during the year, it is not intended to be the measurement of the effect of all such occurrences. So you can consider the things that occur during the year, but it does not measure the effect. It takes into account, but it does not measure. So it is simply allocation. There is no measurement going on. There is no valuation going on. Valuation and measurement would be different things. So for example, if I am charging depreciation, I'll say that I am allocating the amount. But if on a particular day I decide that I want to check the correct value of my machine, I want to check how much it is going to be sold for in case I decide to sell it. I really want to know the market value of that machine. Then what I can do is I can call upon a valuer and I can find out the value of the machine based on its physical condition and other factors that have affected it during the time that I have owned it. So there is no measurement or valuation involved in depreciation, and that is the point that we need to be clear about. Now, moving to the causes of depreciation. So we have four causes of depreciation. And the first cause is the internal cause. So internal cause means due to use. Since an asset is being used by the owner, whatever happens that leads to depreciation can be termed as internal cause. So the first internal cause is wear and tear. That means the physical damage that happens due to continuous use. In machines, you can observe that due to friction, certain parts they get eroded and they need to be replaced, or certain parts they get damaged. So this wear and tear is one of the internal causes, and the other causes is depletion or exhaustion. That means the utility of the resources keeps on declining because it is being used up by the person. Then the second cause that we have is external cause or economic cause. Now, external cause means there is nothing that a business can do about these causes. They are completely determined by external factors or the external environment of the business. The first one is obsolescence. So obsolescence is due to technology or due to restrictions that we have already discussed. And then there is inadequacy. So inadequacy is the opposite of obsolescence in a way. Obsolescence, we've considered that there are restrictions and the demand has changed drastically. That means negatively the demand has changed and there is no demand for your particular product. Hence, you need to let go of your asset that produces the particular product. Inadequacy means that your demand or your product's demand has grown so high that your existing asset is not able to satisfy that demand. And in such a scenario, your existing asset, your existing machinery is not enough, and hence it needs to be changed. You have to get better machinery that can manufacture more products. Then the next cause is the time element, that is the effluxion of time or passage of time. So this we already know that this is with regards to our intangible assets or even leasehold property. And this is going to be termed as amortization when we are charging it. And the last reason is abnormal occurrences. Abnormal occurrences. So abnormal occurrences means anything that is not an event that happens normally in your business. So this can be in the nature of any disaster, that is floods or say earthquakes or even say tsunamis, or plainly in the nature of an accident. All these are abnormal occurrences that lead to damage of your assets. So they can damage your assets partly or completely. And depending on that, the value of the asset will reduce. Eventually, that leads to depreciation or charging of depreciation. Now, let us move to the characteristics of depreciation. First of all, this depreciation we are charging as an expense. It is an expense. So it is charged against profits. It is charged against profits because it is an expense. Then depreciation indicates diminution in service potential. That means it shows the decline in the ability of the asset to satisfy the needs of the user. The next, it estimates loss of the value of an asset. Most important thing that we need to remember is that it estimates loss. It is not actual loss. It estimates. It is not exact. It is not actual. It is an estimate. I use it for 1 year and the effect is estimated of that use, and based on that depreciation is charged. Next, depreciation depends upon different assumptions. Because it is working on estimates, there are also assumptions involved. Now, these assumptions are related to, first of all, effective life, that is the useful life. And secondly, residual value of an asset. Residual value. So whatever useful life I have estimated, I can also try and estimate what will be the value that is left over after using that asset. For example, if I buy an asset today for rupees 1 lakh and I'm going to use it for 2 years, I can also estimate that after 2 years, the value of this thing will be rupees 20,000. Now, this value can be termed as residual value, that is the leftover value, or you can call it as scrap value. Scrap meaning that machine or that asset will be sold off as scrap. Next point is that it is process of allocation. So we are allocating the cost as an expense. And it is not valuation. We are not valuing anything. It is just a process of allocation. Then moving on, the next point is that depreciation arises mainly from internal causes. So mainly due to use, there is the need for charging depreciation, but it can also cause due to external reasons, and the treatment that is given is the same that is given to any external transactions, that is rent, salary, etc. So you're charging it against profits as an expense. In case of other expenses, you have an external party with whom you are doing that transaction, where you are receiving the benefit and you are paying certain amount in exchange. Here, for depreciation, you're not paying anything. You've already paid, you have already done capital expenditure, out of which you are charging certain amount as revenue expenditure. This point we had seen in the difference between capital and revenue expenditure, that capital expenditures are converted into revenue expenditures. Next point, depreciation on any particular asset is restricted to the working life of the asset. So I can charge depreciation on an asset only during its working life. The moment its working life is over, I cannot charge any depreciation. Or if it is sold off, it is not present in my business, I cannot charge depreciation. So for example, let's say that I bought an asset on 1st April 2021. Now my year end is 31st March. So until 31st March 2022, I had this asset. So in this case, I can charge depreciation on 31st March 22. Now this asset After 3 months, that is on 30th June 22, it was sold. So whatever depreciation is left from this day to this day needs to be charged on this day itself. So when it is sold on that day itself, I'll be charging depreciation. I will not do it at the end of the year because this asset is going out of my business. On that day itself, I'll be charging whatever depreciation is left over. And the last point, it is charged on tangible fixed assets. It is not charged on any current asset. You will not charge depreciation on cash or bank balance or debtors or stock or any prepaid expenses. You will charge depreciation only on fixed assets, specifically tangible fixed assets. When you have intangible fixed assets, it is not called as depreciation, it is called as amortization. You have to call it as amortization only. Okay, and moving ahead, we are going to see the objective and necessity for providing depreciation. Why exactly are we charging depreciation? So first reason for charging depreciation is that we need to correctly calculate the cost of production. Your fixed assets are being utilized for the purpose of producing goods. Whatever happens to those fixed assets, whatever effect that production has on those fixed assets, that is termed as depreciation. So this depreciation is an expense, and hence when you are calculating the cost of production, the amount that you have spent to produce a certain quantity of goods, you need to add this depreciation to that cost. You need to consider this depreciation, and only then you will get this correct cost of production. Or else whatever cost of production you are getting is going to be inaccurate or incorrect. Then second point is that we want to correctly calculate profits. Now this depreciation being an expense, it is charged against profits. So whenever you charge depreciation as an expense, you are correctly considering all the expenses. And your profit is the difference between your income and your expenses. So if you do this correctly, if you correctly charge all the expenses, then only you will be able to find the correct profit of your business. Or else it will not be a correct and true figure. The third thing that will happen when we charge depreciation is that our fixed assets are disclosed at a reasonable value. If we show them at cost continuously, the cost that we have paid to buy them, then our assets will be shown at higher value than their actual value. So if the value is too high, then the position that we are portraying in our financial statements will be incorrect. When we charge depreciation, we are showing that our assets are being put to use and their value is declining, value is reducing, and hence the figures that are seen in the financial statements are more accurate. Then the next objective is to provide for replacement cost, that is provision of replacement cost. Now, whenever you have an asset, you know that it is going to be put to use for a certain number of years, and after the time expires, you're going to require a new asset. Buying an asset takes considerable amount of money. It requires significant amount of money. It's not a small thing. It is not something that you can do regularly. So if you want to buy an asset, you need to have the amount available to you. And hence, what we do is every year when we charge this as an expense, the effect of charging as an expense is that our profit will reduce. That means we have certain amount available to us that can be put to use in the future periods. So when my asset becomes old and I require a new asset, this depreciation can help me pay for that new asset. That is, it will help me to replace that old asset. Okay, with this, we will stop here. The remaining 2 points we will continue with in the next session. Thank you.